Hera is often introduced as Zeus's wife. But that framing hides the bigger story. She is one of the oldest and most important divine figures in Greek religion. A goddess tied to queenship, marriage, and public order. In the myths, Hera appears as both protector and rival. A divine force that can shelter families while also punishing betrayal. That tension is exactly why she remained vivid for so long. Her cult was not a minor side note. Hera was worshipped across major Greek centers, including Argos and Samos, where temples made her power visible in stone, ceremony, and civic identity. That matters because the goddess was more than a mythic character. She was part of how communities thought about marriage, legitimacy, lineage, and the fragile politics of the household. The symbols associated with Hera tell the same story. Peacock feathers, cows, diadems, and pomegranates all speak to beauty, fertility, status, and watchfulness. Not just jealousy. Greek myths often make Hera sound angry. But anger in myth is rarely simple emotion. It is power defending itself. Especially in a world where marriage could be sacred and deeply unequal at the same time. When Zeus breaks his promises, Hera becomes the one who remembers. Her conflicts with lovers, rivals, and children reflect a mythic universe where betrayal has consequences and reputation never stays private for long. That memory made her a powerful literary figure. Later poets used Hera to explore jealousy, dignity, resentment, and the burden of being the one who holds the marriage system together while being hurt by it. Her association with childbirth and women added another layer. Hera was not only about marriage as ceremony. She was also connected to the dangerous boundary between family continuity and physical risk. The Heraia and other festivals turned worship into public performance. Music, sacrifice, procession, and sacred space all transformed private hope into collective ritual. Which is how gods become socially real. Temples dedicated to Hera were often built to impress. Monumental columns and formal layouts were not only beautiful. They were designed to make the goddess feel present, authoritative, and impossible to ignore. Argos gave Hera a political home as much as a sacred one. When a city claims a goddess like Hera, it is also claiming continuity, legitimacy, and a place within a larger moral order. Samos did something similar, linking Hera to landscape, coastal power, and island identity. In Greek religion, the location of a cult often mattered as much as the story told about it. Myths around Io and the Watchers called Argus show Hera as vigilant and strategic. She is not only jealous in those stories. She is also a god who sees, tracks, and enforces consequences. When Heracles enters Hera's orbit, the stories turn into a long conflict between divine order and heroic chaos. He becomes the man who cannot escape her attention. And that attention shapes the legend. That conflict says something important about Greek storytelling. Heroes are not always celebrated for themselves alone. They are tested against the social structures and divine powers that define their world. Hera's image also changed over time. In later art, she could become serene, regal, almost untouchable, because every age remade her in the style that best fit its own idea of authority. That transformation is part of why she endured into the Roman world. Hera became Juno, and with that shift, the same divine pattern kept moving through new political and cultural systems. The endurance of Hera tells us that gods survive when they solve human problems. Marriage, legitimacy, jealousy, childbirth, and power are not ancient topics only. They are still recognizable now. That is why Hera can feel both distant and familiar. She is a goddess of formal order, but also a figure shaped by hurt, memory, and the politics of being expected to keep everyone else together. The most interesting myths are the ones that expose the system inside the story. Hera does that constantly, because every argument around her also reveals something about Greek society itself. For viewers today, Hera feels powerful, because she is not softened into a simple stereotype. She carries dignity, resentment, duty, and authority in the same figure, which makes her unusually human for a god. That complexity is why artists kept returning to her. Every statue, vase, and temple image gave them another chance to ask what happens when a ruler must also be a partner, witness, and judge. Hera also represents the public side of private life. Marriage was never only romance in the ancient world. It was property, lineage, alliance, and status, and Hera sat at the center of that reality. That is why her temples mattered so much. They were not just religious buildings. They were civic statements that turned an abstract goddess into a visible part of how communities organized themselves. A goddess like Hera thrives on repetition. Every festival, prayer, and household ritual gave her another chance to appear as the force that stabilized what people feared would fall apart. That is also why she works so well in storytelling. Hera gives myth a heartbeat. She turns the family into a stage, the marriage into a contract, and the contract into a drama. Modern audiences often read Hera as a symbol of boundaries. She shows what happens when power is expected to be graceful, patient, and invisible, even while it carries the weight of everything around it. That reading makes her surprisingly contemporary. Hera speaks to anyone who has ever held a system together without getting full credit. Which is one reason her stories still feel alive. The best myth episodes are not only about gods. They are about how people explain their own lives through divine language. And Hera is one of the clearest examples of that process. When you step back, Hera is not simply the goddess of marriage. She is the goddess of continuity, reputation, and the fragile public trust that allows a household or a kingdom to feel stable. Seen this way, Hera is not a side character at all. She is one of the keys to understanding how Greek religion blended household life, city identity, and divine authority into one living network. Her story endures because it is bigger than romance or jealousy. It is about the cost of holding order together, even when the order itself is unfair, unstable, and constantly under strain. A concrete evidence point is the Heraean itself. Sanctuaries at places like Samos and Olympia show Hera as a public architectural presence, not only a character in domestic drama. Columns, votive offerings, processions, and sacred space turned her authority into something a community could walk through, fund, repeat, and remember. Another source clue comes from the stories attached to Argos. Hera was not only Zeus's wife in poetry. She was a patron whose prestige could mark a region, a procession, and a civic identity. In that setting, myth and local politics were not separate languages. They reinforced each other every time a community gathered in her name. The popular version often turns Hera into a jealous obstacle. But the evidence is wider than that. Ritual Hera was connected to marriage, transition, legitimacy, childbirth, royal imagery, and the visible stability of households and cities. The myths are dramatic, because the social stakes underneath them were already enormous. That is why a careful Hera episode has to keep two truths on screen at once. In myth, she can be severe, wounded, and frightening. In cult, she can be protective, civic, and stabilizing. Reducing her to one emotion flattens the goddess and also flattens the society that made her important. If you want more stories where myth, power, and politics collide, stay with the Lore Atlas. We keep following the gods, because they still explain the people who made them.